Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Gethin. I am the General Manager here at BWD in Sydney. We're on George Street. We have a light rail track being built in the background, so do apologise if there's any trucks or train noises. Just whilst we're waiting for a few more people to join us, I'm going to gratuitously plug some of the other events and communications we've got coming out at the moment. At the end of the month, on the 28th of October, Chinyi and I will be sharing some of the things we learnt whilst we were in China, not all of the things, some of that is private. And yeah, we had an amazing time up in Shanghai and Xiamen, and we're just pulling together as we speak some of the findings as to what's happening from a marketing and communications perspective up in China. So would encourage you to register for that one. We also have an ebook out at the moment called Combating Data Fatigue, the Future of Data Viz. And as you probably know, we produce a lot of data visualization, whether it's infographics or microsites or long-form reports. And we've collated together some of our favorite examples into this fun and interactive ebook, which you can download from our website. So again, if you've got a few minutes to spare and if you have an interest in visualizing data, then I would encourage you to download our ebook. But that's not why you're here today. Oh no, that is not why you're here. Today you are here for our brand refresh webinar, How Do You Know When It's Time? And I'm joined, it's my great honor to be joined by Chris Chatfield, who is actually the brains of this operation. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Gethin.
Thank you for joining us. You'll mostly be hearing from Chris. I am in the role largely of Flavor Flav to his Chuck D this morning.
Oh.
So I'm just the hype man. And Chris will take you through our 10 top tips. And as we go, to check that you are following along at home, there will be a series of poll questions. So after each tip, I'll ask you to consider your own brand and whether you think it's time to refresh it or indeed if you're happy with its performance. So I will now stop talking and hand it over to Christopher.
Thank you, Gethin. And welcome everybody this morning to the Brand Refresh webinar. As Gethin already mentioned, we are going to be going through a series of factors that could suggest your brand needs a refresh. But just to get us started, we're going to talk about what a brand is and what a brand refresh is, just so everybody's on the same page. We all know what we're talking about. Hopefully everybody here already does, but if they don't, well, we'll find out. It sort of involves a pair of socks. What is a brand refresh? Well, it's not a total company overhaul. It's more tweaks to your brand to help change perception and reinvigorate it. And I should stress that this is not something to be taken lightly, not too often. And as my metaphor suggests, it's not like changing the colour of your socks. And how can you tell if it's time for a refresh? Well, maybe your business strategy has shifted, or you've changed the products you sell. Maybe your communications are getting stale, or you're merging with another company. There's all manner of possible reasons, but they do normally revolve around something changing, don't they, Gethin?
They do. You're putting your radio voice on.
I am putting my radio voice on. BBC radio. If change has affected your organisation, your brand probably isn't reflecting your business as well as it could do. And to help you decide if it's time for a refresh, as we've said, we are going to be showcasing 10 factors that could make you pause to consider your brand. Over the next 45 minutes to an hour, we'll take a look at those factors, share some real-world examples, many of which we've been involved with at some point, and they'll talk about how other companies have responded to those factors, and also help you determine if now is the time for you to act. We should say that these 10 are by no means the only factors, nor necessarily are the most important. There are many, many more we could discuss, but we'd probably need a whole day for that. But first, what we call the elephant in the room. This is not a brand. there's a common misconception that brand is a logo, and there is an awful lot more to it. This lovely looking gentleman, however, is a brand. I think everybody probably knows him as David Beckham. Almost everybody loves him, I think. Women want him and men want to be him. But why is that? Well, some people would say it's because he's a talented footballer. He's rich. He's pretty good looking. He's got lots of sexy tattoos, if you're into that sort of thing. There's a lot of other footballers, though, who are pretty similar, but they don't appeal in the same way. So why is that? Well, he is a nice guy. He's polite. He does a lot of charity work. He's a family man who clearly loves his wife and kids. He's got a bit of an edgy dress sense, whether it's wearing a sharp suit or wearing a biker jacket, jeans and t-shirt. He's made a lot of mistakes in the past, but he's admitted to them and he's bettered himself for it, which makes him real and pretty authentic. His is a consistent and very carefully looked after brand. So how do we explain this in a business context? Your brand is the promise you make to your customer. It defines how people should feel about your organisation. It optimises belief in what you offer, and it's an abstract idea that's held in the hearts and minds of your customers. And you need to deliver on that promise with every interaction that you have with your customer, in the same way that David Beckham does. Otherwise, there's a disconnect between what you're saying and what your customer believes, which results in a lack of trust. Therefore, a brand is this, all of this. It is the voices and actions of your people when they talk to customers. It's the products you produce. It's the tone of the emails you send. It's the advertising, the brochures, the flyers and other collateral you produce. And it's the buildings and signage that people work in or visit. It's every touch point for people interacting with you. Why are we telling you all this? Because most of the 10 factors that we're going to talk about involve issues with feelings just as much, if not more, than logos. So, let's start the countdown. Top of the pops. There we go. Number 1, what we call cold sweats at night. This is about refreshing your brand to improve your return on investment. Are diminishing or stagnant returns keeping you up at night with cold sweats? Does that happen to you, Gavin?
Sometimes.
Yes, yes. Or is growth not what you'd hoped for? Then you need to find out what's causing the problem and how you can address it. And yes, hopefully your bedroom won't look like that at night. Very cold, sweaty. Just as a matter of reference, this film, Paranormal Activity, is a good example of return on investment. It is the most profitable movie of all time based on ROI.
Fun fact.
Yeah, there you go, throw that in there. The first example here, real world example, is Airbnb. Everybody, I think, knows it as a huge online success. But this wasn't always the case. Between 2007, when it launched, and 2010, growth was really small. The company owners knew people wanted their service, but didn't know why they weren't getting the sales they wanted. The strategy appeared sound, so what was holding them back? Well, they did their research, and by the way, this is something that we stress with every single one of these factors, is research, research, research. They did their research, which included staying at 24 Airbnb listings, and discovered that users weren't doing a great job of presenting their listings online. Photography was particularly amateur and messy, and didn't represent how great the rentals were. So, what could you do if you were in this situation? Well, basically track, measure, and respond. And Gethin's going to just talk about this briefly.
Yeah, so most of the tips we've got for you today focus on kind of creative decisions, but obviously there are some harder metrics to track, and it depends on what your business is about. I know a lot of our larger clients do some brand tracking. Others have got some social listening measurements that they keep an eye on. But for others, it might simply be about, well, how much return are we getting for the effort we're putting in as far as our marketing spend or our product mix. So it's really about making sure you've got that information available to you, and then checking over time, are we still having the effect that we were previously? And if not, then there could be a variety of factors to consider, but one of them is obviously, is your brand getting outdated?
Mm.
Which is the purpose of today's presentation.
Segue, thank you. So, just in the real world example of Airbnb, what did they do? Well, in 2010 they launched the Airbnb photography program, where hosts could automatically schedule a professional photographer to come in and photograph their space so their online presence was better. And the result, well, within 12 months, listings were 2.5 times more likely to be booked. And as you can see that on the graph, that there was an instant jump there. So just shows how important that is. I think we've got a poll to talk about, haven't we?
We have our first poll of the day, so I will now launch the poll on screen and ask you to answer this question. And the question is, we have seen diminishing returns on our marketing investment. Do you strongly agree with that statement? Agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or we don't track these sorts of things? So please click the buttons at home, and then we'll see what the results are. A little bit like Eurovision.
It is, isn't it?
Come in, Poland.
Lithuania.
Come in, Poland. Come on, not everybody's voted. You have to commit. Don't be shy. Oh, nearly there. Alright, some people are just holding out, aren't sure what the answer is. Or indeed, maybe they're having technical difficulties. Alright, I'm going to close the poll now and share those results. And interestingly, a lot of people don't track these sorts of things, and obviously that is problematic. I also recognise it can be an expensive thing to do, and so I suppose the key finding is, well, pick what's important to you and focus in on maybe 1 or 2 of those key performance indicators and use those as your guiding light. And if you do work for a larger organisation, then you maybe have a think about some social listening tools and investing in those areas, because that'll be a good measure to see how you're going against the likes of Airbnb, for example. All right, let's move on to point number 2.
Point number 2. This is what we call Dave.
Or Dave.
Well, my name's not Dave.
Should we explain?
We probably should, shouldn't we? Yes. So, for those of you who, well, hopefully, a fair number of you all know the British TV sitcom Only Fools and Horses, but for those of you who don't, there is a running gag all the way through the series where one of the characters calls another character Dave. But his name isn't Dave, it's Rodney. The point that we're getting at with this is that despite repeatedly correcting people, you're finding that your organisation is being mistaken for another company. Our real world example is APA. We've been working with APA for the last 2 years or so now. They're an organisation that almost nobody outside of this industry had ever heard of.
Heard of them.
No.
Hello, Malou, if you're listening. We have heard of you now.
Mention its name and people assumed it was a small company that worked in one of these areas that you can see on screen. But it's not at all. It's actually the 30th biggest company in Australia, with a market capitalisation of over $9 billion. So it's pretty large and pretty significant. It's also a huge Australian success story. It started in the year 2000 with just six people in the company. It now employs over 1,600 people. And it owns or operates one of the largest interconnected energy infrastructure frameworks across the country. So why the confusion? Well, they had a weak, outdated visual presence, as you can see by their old logo on the screen there. And they also had confusing messages about what the organisation meant. And it meant that people weren't either not noticing the company, or if they were, they didn't care to find out more about it. So what can you do in this situation? Well, quite simply, you need to embolden your brand. Maybe your logo looks weak, thin, like the example we just showed, and doesn't get noticed. Maybe you're not advertising in the right places. Are your audience going to see those places where you're advertising? Or maybe your message isn't getting through the right way. How can you make people hear about you? For example, can you make your proud staff your staff proud guardians of the company so that they shout about where they work? With APA, we helped them simplify their brand strategy to give a clear set of messages that meant staff not only understood how successful the company was, it made them realise how proud they could be of that success story. And also so that they would then go on and tell all their friends, colleagues, customers and more about what APA is and what it does. We also created a bolder version of their logo, much clearer to see from a distance on uniforms. This is a really simple change, but it's been incredibly effective. And we gave them a fresh visual identity to go along with the logo as well. This would make staff proud to say they worked there, and also help potential recruits feel really keen to work there. And then finally we plotted some advertising where fly-in, fly-out contractors would see it. And this is a good example, isn't it, Geth, of evolving a logo rather than coming up with new.
Yes, it is, Chris. Thank you for asking me that question that you raised. You might be looking at this screen going, well, that logo doesn't look very different to what they had before. And yes, that is largely true. We have taken what's there and made it bolder and stronger.
Yeah.
But as Chris was saying, a brand is more than just a logo. It's about what it stands for and how it affects people's behaviours. And whilst we've made the visual identity really strong and interesting, I think by telling their brand story, by helping them work out what APA stands for, people have a greater sense of pride in their company. And they already had a really strong culture anyway. We just helped to crystallise that for them. So
that's right.
It was a great project to work on and one we're very, very proud of. And if you're watching this presentation, you're going, well, yeah, we want to keep hold of our old logo, or we don't want a revolution, we just want evolution, thank you. Then this shows you what can be done in those circumstances. All right, should we have another poll?
Would you have another poll?
All right. So for those people who didn't vote last time, I'm expecting better things of you. So question number 2 is, nobody knows who we are or what we stand for. Do you strongly agree with that statement? Agree? Disagree? Strongly disagree? Well, sorry, I thought you were talking to somebody else. Some early votes in. Do you see that? Some people were on it.
Fast.
Some people were on it. Other people holding out that want to commit. Come on, Lithuania.
This is where we need Terry Wogan, and a lovely interludes.
Yes. All right. Still not everybody. Still some people holding out, or perhaps don't have the bandwidth to enter the poll. But we'll go with what we've got. All right. So here are the results. So it was a strong statement. Nobody knows who we are or what we stand for, and some people did agree with that. Now, it might be in some instances people don't need to know what you stand for, so long as your customers get the service that they want. We've worked with some fairly anonymous IT or some B2B clients who are only known by their direct clients, but they do a good job and keep things going, and that's okay to a degree. But when it comes to recruitment and sort of creating a strong culture, I think that's something that needs to be addressed. And a branding project is one way to help you address that.
Yeah, it definitely is limiting, isn't it?
All right.
Okay, shall we move on to the next factor?
Yes.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I don't think we need to explain the story behind this one. But this is about your brand guidelines. If every piece of communication you produce looks, sounds or acts differently, then your organisation is going to come across as confusing and as a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde. Your customers are not going to clearly understand why you exist, how you work, what you do, or where you want to end up. And if they don't understand you, they're not going to trust you. And would you buy from someone you don't trust?
No. Chris is on the left in this picture.
Oh,
by the way.
that's
be on the right, particularly at this time in the morning.
I think you're selling yourself a little short there. The example here is the Tate. With roots as far back as 1897, when it was known as the National Gallery of British Art. Tate, as we now know it, was established in the year 2000 as a network of 4 museums and art galleries. when Tate launched a new identity in 2000. It was revolutionary and helped Tate become one of the most recognised and celebrated cultural brands in the world. Since then, while the logo was iconic, with over 75 versions of the logo to choose from and applications becoming incredibly messy, the overall system needed greater focus. What can you do if you're in this situation? Well, let's assume that the core essence of your brand is sound. It might be that the problem is one of the following. You've got brand guidelines that are confusing or are unusable in day-to-day work. Now, an easy quick fix for that is to survey what's not working with employees and other users, then fix the guidelines to make them easier to use. Also, just offer basic training to people that are using it day to day. Another issue is that you have guidelines that no one knew existed at all, which we come across all the time. Lovely sets of brand guidelines have been produced, they've been squirreled away on the server of the company somewhere and forgotten all about. And what can you do about that? Well, again, a simple fix would be to create some form of promo advertising around it, and also, very importantly, get the CEO or MD to wax lyrical about them. It's incredibly important with all of these things that it comes from the top down. Your leadership team really need to be on board with any kind of branding project, otherwise it will fail. And another example might be that your staff don't understand why they should use the guidelines. People are a lot more creative than we give them credit for. And then they might want to create something beautiful and creative for the company. But, you know, that's all very well, but they often forget that they're not designing for themselves. They're designing for an audience who expect something to look and feel the same way every time it's produced. And if the customer gets something particularly out of the ordinary, they're going to feel that something's out of whack, and they're not really going to trust it. So what you can do with that is small group training with key users to instill why the brand is the way that it is. Get them to love the brand and then pass that on to other people. With the Tate, what they did was they got rid of these 75 different versions of the logo, had just a single version that retains the essence of the identity, and allowed their internal team to focus on messaging and implementation rather than worrying about multiple fuzzy iterations of a mark. They simplified the logo down to a one that was made of a smaller number of dots, so that it was easier to use across different media, and they just use a single custom typeface. So combine all that together and you get a much more consistent, more usable visual language. And I think we have a poll about this one as well.
We do. It's a tricky one, this. The poll question here is, our marketing communications feel inconsistent. Do you strongly agree? Agree? Disagree? Strongly disagree? Or this stuff makes me so mad I could... That's the Jekyll and Hyde reference. Oh, people have launched into this poll. I love this question. It is one of the trickier ones, I think, this maintaining consistency.
Yeah.
And particularly when you work in a large organisation and people are energised to get involved, it can be a tough balance.
I think the more time that you have with a brand, the more this happens as well. When you first launch a brand, there's always excitement over it, and everybody wants to use this new shiny brand. But yeah, give it 6 months, a year, 2, 3 years, it can lose focus.
All right, results are in. I think Claire and Darren are holding out and not voting. But there we are. That's our stuff. Hello, Claire. Hello, Darren. So 50% agree with this statement, and that's not uncommon. But 38% of people think their branding and their communications are pretty consistent, and 13%, hopefully none of our current plans, find this stuff makes them so mad they could. So yeah, I think that's a fairly reflective of what we often hear. So yes, again, this is why brand guidelines and some of those other tips that Chris shared earlier are an important part of the process.
Okay, on to number 4. I feel like I want to say this with a terrible, terrible American accent, but I can't do it, so I'll do it. Total Global Solutions Limited, the leaders in innovation. That really was
That
terrible.
was good. That was
terrible
good.
accent. What we're getting at with this one is your name holding you back in some way. Now, this could be because it's either so open-ended it's meaningless, like this name that we made up, or it could be the opposite end of the spectrum where it's too restrictive and nobody knows you in the market and they forget that you're there. And the example the real-world example that we're going to use for this one is a company known as Business Writers. So for those of you who know, that's actually our original name. We obviously we are BWD, but 20 years ago or so, when the company was first created, we were known as Business Writers. We built a fantastic reputation as a writing and design agency with a no-nonsense but creative approach to corporate comms. From Business Writers, we became Business Writers in Design. But then a few years ago, we found that we were doing a lot more strategic work, whether that was in branding, sustainability, or otherwise, and the name didn't reflect it. And the crux came when we were invited to pitch to an exec team for a project who, judging us by our name, didn't understand what we were doing there. And something had to change. What can you do when you're in this situation? Well, firstly, find out if there's any equity in the name. Does your audience know and trust it at all? Do they call you something else, e.g. your acronym of the name? And although it's not your real name, does that acronym have equity? If yes, then you might just need a tweak to the name. If there's no equity at all, though, and this anonymity is really affecting your business, it's worth considering a complete name change. But be aware this is a really big step. It's lots of names are already taken. There can be legal issues in trademarking names, and it can damage your SEO as well. Plus, you could lose existing clients. For us, it was actually fairly simple. We did a lot of workshops and interviews, both internally with staff and with external customers, to find out things like what they called us, what they thought we did well, how they felt about us, and what sort of personality we have. We discovered that there was a lot of equity in the existing name, but we also discovered that people called it BWD already anyway, because the name was quite long, the full name. This was a perfect result for us, when we could rename as BWD without alienating existing customers whilst ditching the name that was restricting the work that we were doing. And the result, well, the fact that you're all here listening to us this morning explaining branding shows that we've successfully moved our business on in just a few short years. And we have yet another poll. Here are the other buzzers.
All right. So, keeping with Total Global Solutions Limited, is your logo and tagline generic or meaningless? Do you strongly agree with that statement? Agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or I can't remember what our tagline is.
They're quick on the buttons, aren't they, this morning?
Sharp, oh, very sharp. I think it's our staff voting for the agree. No, don't say that. You need to change your vote if you're a BWD staff member. Say how wonderful the brand is. All right, let's have a look at the results. So most people feel that their logo or tagline has some meaning, which is good. A few can't remember what the tagline is, and that's not uncommon. A lot of brands don't bother with one these days anyway, and with people's attention spans so short. It's really about, what does your brand make them feel rather than necessarily their tagline. But yeah, so on the whole, people seem quite happy with their brands, I would say, from that poll, which is encouraging.
Yeah. So even if there are other issues that they need to deal with, then at least they've got a good starting point there.
Okay.
Okay. On to number 5.
You're going to try a French accent.
Try a French accent. Your mother was a hamster and your father smelled of elephants.
That's good. That's good.
Thank you. Well, it does help. I've got a Belgian wife.
Hello, Catherine.
So this
try not to have the baby while you're listening to Catherine. Stay calm, deep breaths. Won't be long now.
This is about refreshing your brand to distance yourself from an unfixable problem. Maybe something that's happened in your organisation that is so monumentally bad you need to do something about it so customers don't associate you with that problem. And that could be an event, or it could be a single person, like the gentleman in the castle, the French held castle in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The example we're using here is an organisation called PRA. They were an internal rope access company that had outgrown their name and a reputation as real thrill seekers. And this was causing them problems winning new business because they were seen as slightly dangerous to work with. They came and wanted a brand overhaul in order to attract more blue chip clients. What do you do if your brand needs revamping from the ground up because of this situation? Well, this is a really big deal. It's similar to starting a company from scratch, and you have very little equity to work with. So firstly, go back to basics. Using your research, focus on what you're really good at to create a new strategy, a brand strategy. And like any brand refresh and any branding project, you should stress that you need to ensure that the brand strategy sits alongside your corporate or business strategy. They are very different things. Consider a new name. We've already talked about naming, but consider a new name. Create a new visual identity. Other reasons to do a complete rebrand like this might be because there's been you're involved in a large merger or acquisition. There might be a legal issue that hadn't previously arisen. For example, you might be entering into a new region or country where you might need to rename the brand. Or there might be a major competitive influence that has basically rendered your business void. Hopefully that won't happen to you. In the example that we're using, PRA, they became Buell. After a lot of research and workshops with them, it was recommended that the organisation had a complete brand overhaul, including ditching their name to get rid of the negative perceptions of it, introduce a new, more safety-led strategy and obvious safety-led visual identity. The rollout for this was hugely successful. Lots of joint venture interest from numerous blue chip organisations that previously had not approached the company.
It's a brave step to take, changing your name, right? And only to be taken in certain circumstances. Yeah. All right, so here's the poll. Our brand has some stinky associations that we've tried to move away from. Do you strongly agree? Agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or I try not to think about it? Buell, a made-up word, Buell, I imagine.
It was, yes. It was chosen because of the solid sound.
Buell.
So yes, there's a term for that, and
onomatopoeic?
It could be. Yeah.
That's not a poll question.
No, it's not. No.
Didn't realize that bit.
No.
All right, let's close the poll. Share the results. So 13% of people think their brand's got some very stinky associations, which is a concern.
Yeah.
And 38% agree that they feel that there are some elements or some customer perceptions that are negative about their organisation, and often that feeling internally is stronger, or you're more conscious of these things than your customers are. So before going down a real big refresh or indeed a rebrand, you really want to check that and do your research. But hopefully, for the 25% of you strongly disagree, then that is not necessary. All right, on to question number 6.
Back to number 6. Oh, the trouble with tribbles.
This is the nerdiest reference in the entire presentation.
I'm sorry, we won't have any more particularly nerdy ones. I'm not even a Star Trek fan either, but there are some other people in the agency who are, and we thought we'd use this. So if there are any Trekkie fans out there, you'll know where this one's coming from, but for those of you that aren't, this is about your organisation being completely overloaded with sub-brands. Multiplying by the hundreds, just like these strange creatures, the tribbles in an episode of Star Trek many years ago. And your parent brand is very much like Captain Kirk there, disappearing under the mass. The problem with having all these sub-brands is that they often end up working separately and competing with with each other and also with the main brand. And this means that the brand completely loses its use. Our example here is a company formerly known as Employers Mutual.
Hello, Karen. Hello, Shelley.
Yes, they are a client of another client of ours, and we've been lucky enough to work with them again for a good couple of years now to help them with a fairly significant brand refresh. The problem that they were having was that the company is extremely successful. It's expanding into new markets and new regions and increasing its service offerings. But it needed help to articulate what it did so well and to clear up confusion around the company name. As you can see on screen there, for regulatory reasons, externally it was known as a number of different organisations: Employers Mutual, New South Wales, EML, Employers Mutual South Australia,
etc.
Yeah. To complicate matters further on, it had numerous sub-brands, both internal and external, which I am not going to list every single one, but as you can see, there's quite a few of them. And they were finding that they were losing pitches on this because people weren't quite sure what the company name was. So they were dealing with one person one day with one email address and another with another email address on another day, and so on and so forth. And there was a distinct lack of trust in the company.
It is a tricky one to manage this because people are showing enthusiasm, right? And they want to get out there, understand the importance of communication.
That's right.
But then you're trying to balance that with being clear to your audience.
Yeah. I mean, it's great that people were so positive about it. But unfortunately, it was confusing the message.
So what can they do about it, Chris?
Well, let me tell you. First, they need to consider whether the organisation should have a monolithic one brand structure, and if so, should you be getting rid of all of your or a lot of your confusing brands that have very little or no equity? And if you do need a number of sub-brands, you just need to make sure there's a distinct brand architecture structure in place to help staff understand how and when to use those sub-brands. And the second thing is to just be conscious that staff put a lot of their own time and effort into this sort of thing, and can feel quite hurt when those sub-brands are taken away. So it needs to be dealt with very sensitively, and a lot of explanation and education around why you're doing the reshuffle as you are. With Employers Mutual, we decided, after a lot of research shown with them, that they needed to position EML as the parent brand. A lot of, again, like an earlier example, a lot of people were calling them EML anyway because their name was quite long. It was very well known as EML, and consolidated the sub-brands with them, provided the organisation with a unified brand identity, focusing on their most important asset, which was their highly skilled people. The strategy and rollout involved creating a new logo, corporate stationery, website, suite of brochures, brand guidelines, a desktop, and a launch video. And those last three things were to help explain the meaning of the new brand to employees, as well as help them understand how it could help make their day-to-day work life easier.
It was a fun project, right?
It was. And we're still helping them as well.
Yeah. And we love working with you, Karen and Shelley. All right, our poll question. We have too many sub-brands and identities for a company our size. Do you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree? Ooh, some interesting results to this one. Early votes cast. All right, people have committed quite quickly to this one, which is telling, I suppose. And most people disagree with this, so suggesting that they don't have too many sub-brands, which is good. It's not always the case. Often for companies that have got a longer history, and often these things have just built up over time. But if you're a relatively new organisation, then hopefully that's not such an issue for you. So a relatively good, clear bill of health there.
Okay, on to factor number 7. Shiny and new isn't always best. Lovely Robert De Niro here. This one is about repositioning areas of your brand to fight off challenges or disruptors. And it's the sort of thing that happens when a new, smaller, more nimble company pops up and disrupts the industry. Almost overnight, you, the incumbent and possibly fairly old organisation, are losing customers and profits. Don't panic. Remember, you've been around for a while. Despite the initial appeal and black magic technology that this upstart is throwing around, you can use the experience that you have to carefully work out the best way to adapt your brand to counter this young upstart. Example here is McDonald's. In recent years, Macca's has seen quite a slide in sales. Numerous factors are probably responsible, but they would include the perceived unhealthiness of the food and the rise of gourmet burgers, which, although they're no more healthy and a lot more expensive, are also far more enticing because they tap into current trends. People want control over what they put into their bodies, they want more choice, they want a resurgence. There is a resurgence in home cooking, and people want to support local food and local eateries, not these behemoths and franchises. What you can do in this situation, well, some large brands, you may be one of them, can use cash they have available to buy the disruptor. Apple would be a good example for this. They're often buying up other companies such as Siri and Beats. But if that's not an option, well, the worst thing business can do is, apart from making to look around in the headlights, is to radically or completely change your business model. This is not necessarily the right thing to do at all. Instead ensure that you're confident in what you do and stand for. I mean, it has worked well so far for you, also. But then look at the ways to adapt some of your brand to counter the threats. It could just be a change to the product you sell, or a change to the perception of the product that you sell. And
because the risk is you feel, or you appear insincere, right?
Yes, that's right.
And so you've got to stay truthful to what you were, but recognizing that things change.
Yeah. If you suddenly change everything altogether, then people are like, well, maybe they didn't believe in their brand to start off with. What's Macca's done? Well, in the last couple of years, it's tried to tap into those current trends and desires and come up with a thing called Create Your Taste, where you can build your own burger and there's a sit-down service. It hasn't thrown its whole strategy out the window, though. Normal Macca's is still available, but it is giving the nod towards the zeitgeist. Whether it will be successful or not, time will tell.
At risk of people stepping off the webinar now to go and buy a Egg McMuffin, right?
Oh, I do like a sausage McMuffin.
Oh, all right. Well, before you go and head to Macca's, a quick poll question. Our brands feel outdated compared to our competitors. Do you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree? Place your votes now. What do you go for? Egg McMuffin?
Sausage and
sausage.
Yeah. It's just not good, really.
Yeah. I like to pretend that I don't go to Macca's.
Yes.
But occasionally.
We can't help ourselves, can we?
Yes. Shout out to all the vegetarians online this morning. All right, let's see what the votes are. A split decision on this one. Some people feel they are a little bit outdated, but just as many people disagree with that decision, and obviously it's dependent upon the organisation that you work for. Again, I think people tend to be more sensitive to this than their audience, that they're looking around the market harder than perhaps their customers are. But as we've seen in the examples we've shared earlier, you can maintain some of your existing assets, whether it's your logo or parts of your brand, but just give it a tune-up, and that can encourage your staff and also encourage your customers as well.
All right. Number 8, you've lost your mojo. Not you specifically.
Wow.
You've definitely not lost your mojo. This is about reconnecting your brand with your customers' emotions. I don't think I need to explain Austin Powers' wonderful mojo and how Dr. Evil attempts to steal it. The emotional connection you used to have with your customers has gone. This is our scenario. Your product has been marked as unhealthy, or the way it's produced, or another perception about it grates against the current zeitgeist. That's the biggest word I'll use today.
Zeitgeist, good.
Yeah. Thank you. Our example is beer. We love beer, don't we? We do. Maybe not at this time of the morning, but we do love good beer. However, it has gone through a bit of a rough patch in recent years, saying it's lost some of its mojo. And there's a few reasons why. Beer is perceived as unhealthy, more fattening, and full of sugar when compared with other alcoholic drinks, especially things such as wine. It's often perceived as blokey, which limits the occasions it can be enjoyed. And there's a current trend with people particularly liking the idea of homegrown craft beers. One of those. So what can you do about this? Well, again, research your customers' changing desires. What's motivating them to buy something else now? Why have they gone off your brand? Do you already address those motivations in your brand strategy? If you do, which is quite possible, the message isn't getting through, so you might need to change your language, your design, or the way your people interact with customers to better inform them and regain their trust. Alternatively, if you aren't addressing it in your strategy, you might need to realign both that and your product or service to satisfy your customers, so you don't lose them or you can get them back. The real world example here we're using is Lion. They're another client of ours. We've been working with them for a good 5 or more years. They are, if you don't know who they are, they're one of Australasia's largest food and beverage companies. They employ over 6,500 people. And we've been helping them out, particularly in the sustainability field, on their sustainability reports and material. So we know quite a lot about their initiatives. They've been working on lots of initiatives to counter the perceived issues of unhealthy beer and misuse of it. They are countering the perception that beer is full of sugar by changing their message. They have a campaign called Beer, the Beautiful Truth. You may have seen this out and about. It's on a lot of bus shelter posters at the moment. This campaign is about busting the health myth by giving customers the real hard facts. For example, on the bottom left of your screen, that's unexpected. Most people don't realise that. 99% sugar-free. It's part of a larger, vibrant beer culture campaign, which is also looking at messaging to make beer more inclusive and aspirational for innovation and celebration of beer from end to end. And as well as changing the message, Lion has also been realigning its strategy slightly by putting their money where their mouth is and addressing how alcohol is misused in campaigns such as Alcohol and Me, an interactive education program that provides real-world tools to help people make smarter alcohol choices.
Alright, so our poll question for this one. Our brand doesn't connect with our customers anymore. Do you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree? Yeah, it's a tricky one, this, because with the Lion example, you can be quite cynical, right, and say, well, beer sales are falling, and therefore they're trying to fight off wine with these sugar-free comments. Or you could look at it and say, well, actually, they take their sustainability issues seriously.
Yeah.
And that actually the work they've been doing in that space has led them to consider aspects of their product mix and their brand.
Yeah.
And changing up in that way. So, yeah, an interesting issue. All right, the results. Interesting. So 43% of people agree that their brand doesn't connect with their customers anymore, whereas 57% disagree, so they are happy with it. So yeah, clear split down the middle there, and yeah, would suggest different paths of action for those people depending on what they voted for. And the reasons for these polls will become clear at the end, I should say. Well, there's some magic coming, I promise. All right.
Okay, on to number 9. If lost, please return to. I think we all know the story of Forrest Gump here. This is about repositioning your brand so you maintain your original purpose. What do you do if you think your brand has lost or could lose its original purpose, threatening everything that made it the success that it is now? A real world example is an organisation called MoneyClip. I've worked with for a while. They provide tailored financial advice and solutions driven solely by clients' objectives. It was started by one man, Sam Qureshi, who wanted to provide a level of long-term advice high enough that he would be proud to give it to his own family and live by the decisions that he was offering them. The company built its client base on word of mouth around Sam, which is great. But as it brings in new staff with different personalities, how does it maintain its purpose, family feel, passion, and level of service? Again, it's something that a lot of small organisations, as they grow, encounter. It's a very tricky one to get around. There's a few things that you can help with. Firstly, never forget to always remember what made you excellent to start with. Ensure it's still relevant, and incorporate it simply and strongly into your brand strategy. So everybody in the organisation, be it senior management or the concierge, they all understand it. And if necessary, update your visual identity to reflect this. Second thing you could do is you need to make sure that your staff's values are aligned with the company's and the visionary leaders, shall we say. And you could also introduce ways to help remind staff feel proud about the brand that they work for. With MoneyClip example, what they've done to avoid losing themselves is the company has never changed its purpose. Everyone is constantly reminded of what they call the MoneyClip way. Recruits are selected so that although they have different personalities, they have values that align with the company's. They promote the idea of being brand proud. Staff have freedom to do what's right so they feel empowered. And rather than wait for a problem to arise, they put in systems such as peer surveys in place so that the culture won't change. Doing all this means that people go home every day proud of the brand they work for and knowing they've had the freedom to do the best they could for their clients.
Yes, a tricky one, maintaining purpose, particularly when there's a strong founder who created the organisation. It's difficult to maintain that same sense of drive and purpose. So how do you feel about that? So this poll question, our penultimate one, our brand has lost sight of its purpose. Do you strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or we never had one to begin with? Speaking of founders, I was looking at that ITS, I-T-S there. Darren always tells me off for using the wrong ITS, but I think I've got it right. Is my grammar right?
Yes, I think it is.
Yes, it's the right ITS, D. All right, the votes are cast. And actually this is a relatively encouraging result, that most people feel that they still have sight of their purpose. But a few people have said they didn't have one to begin with. And yeah, there's a lot of talk around purpose. We joined B Corp a little while ago, which is an organisation or a collective of organisations that are there to help make the world a better place in many ways. And they talk a lot about purpose and why organisations exist. And it is a very attractive thing to have, particularly for younger employees. If you can say, well, this is where we're heading, this is why we do what we do. So defining that through a branding project or through workshops is a good way to give people direction. All right, on to our final point, and we are bob on time.
Oh, God. Number 10. Are those 407s getting?
No.
Oh, thank goodness. So, thought we'd finish with another slightly obscure point for you. 407s, there's a film with Ryan Gosling and Steve Carell in it, where Steve Carell wears awful clothing, including a pair of, as you can see here, rather awful New Balance 407s. I have nothing against New Balance trainers, by the way, just those ones. The point I'm trying to make in a very, very roundabout way here is that your logo may be embarrassingly old-fashioned, not just visually, with drop shadows and bevels, but also impossible to work with digitally. Here are some examples of some slightly embarrassing logos. I'm not going to knock any of these because, particularly because we didn't design any of these, and I'm sure the designers involved did worked very, very hard to get them where they were. However, there are some things on most of these logos which are not fantastic. Lots of drop shadows, got gradients. There's a huge amount of detail in quite a few of these as well, which if you would have put this small, yeah, particularly like the original Apple computer one, which is on the second column, second row, they just wouldn't really work very well now. What you can do about this kind of thing? Well, let's assume, again, you've done your research, your strategy's sound, you might just need a visual identity refresh, and some brand refreshes are just about the visual identity. Whatever you do, ensure that any new identity is sympathetic to the strategy you've got and also to your stakeholders, both internal and external. Firstly, look at decluttering. Get rid of the bells and whistles that are just hiding a weak logo. Secondly, make sure you're unique. You don't want to look like the competition. But on the flip side, you want to make sure that you're only far enough removed as you feel comfortable with. You need to be authentic about this. How far you want to be removed depends on how brave you are, which itself comes from your brand strategy. And don't have a logo that is just following a current trend. Bright pink is the trend this year. In a couple of years' time, it probably won't be the colours you use. And finally, consider your forms of output. There's no point in having a logo that looks fantastic side of it, but it's a small, bloody pixelated if it's just a fact. I would say.
All right, so our final poll question is really calling what you feel. And so the question is here, I just don't feel proud of our brand anymore. Do you strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or I just updated my LinkedIn profile if anybody's interested? I won't be sharing these results. But yeah, it's about that personal sense of pride. Like if you're the brand owner, do you use it with pride, or do you think there's room for improvement?
The last thing you want is all of your staff cringing every time they have to use a logo.
I can't believe that was the original Apple logo.
Yeah.
Are you sure about that? Yeah. All right. Let's hope so. All right. And the results are in. And yeah, on that personal question, 29% of people agree that they just don't feel that sense of pride, and it's sometimes an intangible reason for that. But people will sense it. If you're not truly feeling it, then your audience will get that as well, because you're not putting the effort in that it necessarily deserves. But according to this poll, nobody is updating their LinkedIn profile, which is good. Good, particularly as we have some staff members on the line. Right.
Okay, that's our 10 factors. We understand that every scenario is different with its own challenges and opportunities, but it gives you a flavour of what might make you sit up and wonder if your brand is doing as well as it could be. And if you're already aware of an issue and can't see how it could be fixed, as Mr. Mannering said, don't panic. There are lots of brands who've come back from seemingly hopeless scenarios over the year. The examples that we can think of off the top of our head are Jenny Craig, Skoda, Target, and even Apple. And finally, if you can think of some others, or if you'd like to talk to us about more, whether your brand is up to scratch, you can contact us.
Yeah, and basically I would say that if you strongly agreed with any of those 10 statements, then you probably need to look at your brand in some way. Now, that might not be a complete overhaul, it might be just some fine tuning, but I think if you strongly agree with any of those negative statements, then there's probably a case for you to update things. All right, and that's all we have time for. We are spot on time, so thank you very much for joining us on this Wednesday morning. If you would like to retake the poll, then I will be sending out the survey questions in the follow-up email. You'll also receive access to a recording of this presentation, so you can listen again or share it with a friend. And yes, if you've got any specific questions that you'd like to ask us, then our email addresses are on the screen. So we will let you get on with your day. Thank you, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Say bye, Chris.
Bye.
Bye, 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 bye.